Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum.
And thank you all so much for listening today.
As always, if you're hearing our voices and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I really wish I could see these two, you are in luck because you can get video versions of our episodes on our Patreon.
Exactly. That's patreon.com/thegrimcurriculum.
And if you want to sign up for our Patreon, but you may not want to pay the money, there is a free tier. You do get some perks with that too, so just go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, shall we get this show on the road?
Yes, we have an exceptionally difficult episode for you all today.
Yep, because today we are covering what is now known as the Easter Sunday Family Massacre.
On March 30th, 1975, James Urban killed his mother, brother, sister-in-law, and their 8 children during a Sunday dinner in Hamilton, Ohio. This is still considered to be the deadliest home shooting by a lone perpetrator in that entire state's history.
While, of course, this just happening in and of itself is very upsetting, and what's even worse is his reasoning behind it.
We want to warn all of you that this episode may be incredibly difficult to listen to.
We often cover terrible people doing horrible things, that is kind of our thing, but every now and again we cover someone so horribly evil that it is really, truly shocking. James Urban is one of these people.
Before we get into the events of that fateful day, we want to start by covering who James was, starting with his early life.
Sometimes we talk about someone who's done awful things, and it's very difficult to pinpoint what could have led them to become such an evil monster. However, this is not the case for James.
It seems as if from an early age he was unwanted, unliked, and truly miserable.
And this is just one of those instances where it basically all starts right at birth.
James Urban Ruppert was born on March 29th, 1934, and things were sour right from the start. His father, Leonard, was a man who had incredibly violent tendencies and a short fuse. He very rarely showed any love or affection towards James or his older brother, Leonard Jr.
Charity Rupert had really wanted a daughter. However, she got James. She would often tell him that he was a mistake because he had not been born a girl, and like Leonard, showed him very, very little affection.
We genuinely don't want to speak ill of the dead, but that's a fact that's been proven by both James himself and people who knew the family. Other people did say she was like a very nice person. She was very sweet, but you can be nice and sweet and maybe not be the best mom.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, this is during the 30s and 40s. I mean, we've said it before, we'll say it again. Parenting just wasn't quite what it is now. Growing up during that time was truly a whole other ballgame.
But even with that being said, James genuinely did have a very difficult childhood.
Leonard Rupert died in 1947 when James was only 12 years old, and by all accounts, he was not missed. In fact, it seemed like overall the boys and their mother were in a better place without him in their lives.
However, this did affect the children in a negative way. Leonard Jr. was thrust into the role as head of the family due to the fact that he was the oldest boy. According to later testimony by James, his brother often picked on him, and the two did not have a positive relationship.
And that's not all that was going poorly for James. He didn't do well in school and didn't have very many friends. He was a small boy, grew to 5'6", and even as an adult weighed around 135 pounds.
This, of course, didn't help with the bullying. At the age of 16, James attempted to end his own life but was unsuccessful. Throughout his teenage years, his relationship with his family and his performance at school continued to plummet.
And despite that, he was able to enroll in college, but it didn't last. After 2 years, he dropped out. During this time, Leonard Jr. appeared to excel in life. He received a degree in electrical engineering and was a seasoned athlete. Leonard Jr. had a ton of friends and was overall well liked. So basically, the polar opposite to the little bro.
Yeah, exactly. And that really didn't help their relationship
No kidding.
at all.
The two young men were treated very differently by their mother. It probably wouldn't surprise any of you that James didn't exactly have much luck with the ladies either.
He didn't appear to have a lot of luck with employment as well. As the years went on, Leonard Jr. became a very successful engineer with General Electric, whereas James hopped from job to job, never seeming to find something that truly suited him.
He would hold all of this against his brother, and the older they got, the less they got along, which is honestly the opposite to me and my sister. Like, we scrapped as kids,
Yeah.
but like, we're besties now.
Right, and I feel like that's pretty normal. I mean, a lot of kids don't get along
Yeah.
because you don't have like the social skills to like really be that nice to
No,
each other,
absolutely
right?
not. And one of you is always winding the other up or like
Yeah.
stealing each other's clothes or whatever. But I think as you get to adulthood, you kind of have a lot more in common. The imbalance
Yes.
balances out, and it's like, okay, we're all adults here. We can get along.
James was one of those people who just blamed all of his problems on everyone but himself. In his mind, the cause of all of his woes was his brother.
As the years went on, Leonard Jr. married a woman named Alma. This made the relationship between the two brothers even worse because, by all accounts, James had dated her first.
Leonard and Alma would go on to have 8 children. James, on the other hand, continued to live with his mother.
And we do want to take just a really quick second to go ahead and just say that none of this excuses in any way the kind of person that James grew up to be. There are countless people who go through very difficult childhoods and even difficult lives as adults and don't mass murder entire families, even their own families. So we know that probably sounds really obvious, but we just want to say this doesn't excuse his behavior. You can feel sorry for the child, but you do not have to feel sorry for the adult.
Yes, and we have said that so many times, and it is so accurate because it's sad when things like that happen to children, but there's plenty of people out there who had terrible childhoods who don't grow up to murder 11 people.
Absolutely.
James Rupert was an awful human being, and sometimes bad people attempt to find ways to blame others for their own actions.
The older he got, the more he thought everyone was just completely against him. His mother loved his brother more. Alma had chosen his brother over him, and it just seemed to him, no matter what he did, life just sucked for James.
In 1965, the Hamilton Police Department investigated him due to the fact that he had made an obscene phone call to someone who worked at the local library. This led him to develop a sort of paranoia that would appear to escalate more and more as time went on.
James admitted that yes, he did make the obscene phone call to this person, but blamed his mother and brother for telling people about what he did and also allegedly reporting to them that he was also a homosexual and a communist. The 60s, everybody.
Right? Seriously. So he would also later report that he believed that the FBI was tapping his phone everywhere he went, and that included local bars because, surprise, surprise, he had a terrible drinking habit.
Despite his relationship with his mother and brother worsening, they still wanted to help him have a better life. They would let him borrow money on a regular basis due to the fact he lost the little cash that he had during the stock market crash of 73 and 74.
This led to him owing the two of them a substantial debt, which of course further strained their relationship.
Along with drinking and what seems to be a slew of bad financial decisions, James developed another hobby.
That's right, folks, he became a gun nut.
This is just a cocktail of red flags that can end in nothing but bad news.
Right? Because that's exactly what this kind of person needs is access to weapons.
100%. So he loved everything about guns, he loved shooting, and he really liked how manly it made him feel. He was deeply insecure about his height and his lack of successes in life, and this allowed him to have some kind of power in his mind.
He would spend many of his days by himself on the banks of the Great Miami River shooting tin cans as target practice. His time in the evenings was often spent at the bar. And he really does tick a lot of those boxes of what it takes to be a giant walking, talking red
Yes.
flag. Like, this is an incredibly angry and deeply insecure human being. And I feel that even from a very young age, he is a ticking time bomb.
Yes, I think to some degree he was certainly on a path that it was hard to get away from, but he also did not make good decisions to help himself get off that path because he was blaming everybody else around him.
Yeah, and he really, I mean, he wasn't doing anything right from the sounds of it.
No. Those who knew him regarded him as a fairly quiet man who enjoyed reading and overall didn't seem like the guy that would cause that much trouble.
He was calm and passive, if not a little weird. James wasn't exactly anyone's favorite person, but he also didn't really seem like the kind of guy capable of mass murder, but there were warning signs.
About a month or two before the murders, James had visited a local gun store and asked the employee there where he could find a gun silencer. And days before the murder, he was seen once again shooting tin cans by the river.
Which, in the grand scheme of things, may not seem terribly concerning, but looking back, it wasn't a good thing.
No. I mean, we've covered family annihilators in the past. John List is always the first one who comes to mind. With him, he had financial troubles that caused him to believe that death would spare his family from being what he considered to be the embarrassment of being poor, which absolutely is the worst excuse out there.
The John List series, those of you who aren't aware, we did cover him. That is probably one of my favorite series that we have done. I think that story is absolutely insane.
The insane is absolutely the word to put it. The lengths he went to cover up his financial issues.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if he'd have just told someone,
Yeah.
and gotten help, this could have all been avoided.
From what we've seen, financial troubles are one of the three main things that cause someone to do something as heinous as kill their entire family. Another is when the killer finds out their spouse is planning to leave them and they simply can't cope with it.
Then we have the other side of the spectrum where the perpetrator murders due to the fact that they've met someone else, and rather than just leave their partner, they kill them. And we've seen this with people in more modern times, like Chris Watts.
Boo.
Boo. Piece of shit.
For James Rupert, it seems to have been the result of a lifetime of pent-up rage along with financial issues.
And we know this because of a woman named Wanda Bishop. She worked at the 19th Hole Cocktail Lounge, a place James would often frequent.
The night before the murders, he arrived at the lounge and the two had a conversation. James told her all about his financial problems and his issues with holding down a job. He also spoke to her about a fight that he had with his mother. He referred to the entire situation as a problem.
It seems as though Charity had finally had enough. She told James that if he could afford to go out and drink 7 days a week, then he could afford to at least somewhat help with the rent. She gave him an ultimatum: either get your shit together or get out of my house.
Which, I mean, that is incredibly fair.
100%. I do not disagree with this at
No,
all.
this is her adult son we're talking about. He rarely worked and seemed to be of total pain to be around. Not only that, he spent what little money that he did have on alcohol and fully expected her to cook and clean for him.
But to little James, this just wasn't fair. It only added to his idea that she loved his brother more and mentally further separating him from the family.
That night, he left the bar at around 11 p.m. James returned a little while later, and Wanda asked him if he had taken care of his problem.
James simply responded, "No, not yet." He then stayed at the bar until it closed at 2:30 in the morning. It was now the very early hours of Easter Sunday.
That day, Leonard Jr. and Alma brought their 8 children over to Charity's house. Spending Easter together was a family tradition that they all looked forward to, especially the children aged 4 to 17 years old.
Everything started off quite well. The children enjoyed an Easter egg hunt in the front yard, while Alma, Leonard, and Charity prepared food for everybody. After the Easter egg hunt, the children played in the living room.
While all of this was happening, James was upstairs sleeping off a rough night of drinking. He's not even trying to be involved. He is truly doing so much of this to himself.
Yes, absolutely.
He finally woke up at around 4 p.m. One of the first things that he did was load his .357 Magnum, 2 .22 caliber handguns, and a rifle. He then made his way downstairs with the weapons.
By all accounts, he spent a few minutes with his family and then told them that he wanted to go target practice at the river. He grabbed his gun and made his way to the back of the first floor of the house.
Charity was in the kitchen making sloppy joes for the family. Alma and Leonard Jr. were sitting at the table chatting with her.
The majority of the kids were playing in the living room. However, some of their bodies would be found in the kitchen.
Allegedly, Leonard Jr. asked James how his car was doing. He took this as an insult, and this appears to be what fully set him off.
I bet he was just waiting for something. He was already stirred up. He already had plans in his mind, and he was just waiting for that trigger point, whatever he decided that was going to be.
All he said to him was, "Hey, how's your Volkswagen?"
Nothing too conspicuous about that.
Nope.
Oh my God. James shot his brother as his back was turned to him. He immediately fell backwards onto the floor. James then shot Alma. He then killed his mother as she lunged towards him in an attempt to save her own life and the lives of the children in the house.
As for the kids, he showed them no mercy. Some of his victims were shot once, killing them instantly, while others would later be found with 2 or 3 gunshot wounds, indicating that he fired multiple times to ensure they were dead.
James then stayed in the house for approximately 3 hours before he finally called the police. During the phone call, he simply stated, "There's been a shooting." He then calmly and quietly made his way outside.
He would later say that he contemplated ending his own life, but that he chose not to because it would be too great of a sin.
Really, you don't think murdering 11 people kind of overshadows that little sin by 11 people?
Right? Yeah. I mean, that right there really says enough.
Absolutely. And as for the children, he showed them no mercy. So, quite frankly, I would have preferred he turned that gun on himself first before killing 8 kids, their parents, and their grandma.
Right? All of this happened in a span of less than 5 minutes.
This happened so quickly that the victims didn't really have time to react, let alone protect themselves. The house would show absolutely no signs of a struggle, and reports would say that the only thing that seemed amiss was an overturned garbage can.
Neighbors came from all around to witness the scene. The first person brought out was John. He was covered and the crowd was quiet. However, a gasp was heard as the blanket slightly moved while he was being transported, and the spectators caught a glimpse of his little shoes.
Ugh.
They then watched as a total of 11 bodies were removed from the home.
That is such a large group of people that when the spectators were looking as this was happening, they're probably bringing out body after body after body
Yeah,
after body. And people around must have been like, holy shit. This isn't just, maybe someone had a heart attack at Easter dinner or
yeah.
something. It's like, oh, they're all gone.
They call it the Easter Sunday Massacre because it was a
Yes.
massacre. This is not just a murder, it is so much more than that.
Absolutely slaughtered. James was quickly arrested without incident and was charged with 11 counts of aggravated murder. Upon his questioning, he proved to be completely uncooperative. He refused to talk about the murders, but did admit that he was the perpetrator. However, he claimed he was not guilty due to that good old reason of insanity.
It was theorized that James had planned the entire time that he would plead insanity, spend some time incarcerated, and then be released after he was deemed to be better. His ultimate goal was to then inherit the family's money, which totaled to approximately $300,000, and basically just live happily ever after.
Delulu. This quickly turned, as you guys can imagine, into a media frenzy. No one in town could stop talking about what James had done. Newspaper sales doubled, and people gathered by the hundreds in an attempt to see the home where this family was killed.
There was also a crazy amount of gossip about the murders, too. People went as far as to say that Alma, Leonard Jr.'s wife, had wanted to end her own life and did so by harassing James to the point where he just did it for her.
That is upsetting.
Oh, yeah,
How dare you?
right?
Oh my god.
It gets like people just have no tact when it comes to some of
Oh
this
my
stuff. Like
God.
they were just gossiping.
Other people told stories about how teenagers broke into the house and found blood everywhere.
Some stated that the whole thing happened due to the fact that James didn't like what Charity had chosen to cook them for dinner that night. And they almost like blamed her for it because she's making sloppy joes.
Right.
But they found the meal on the stove. And so they were saying, like, oh, haha, he killed her because she was making hamburger helper for dinner.
Oh my god. When you first said it, it didn't surprise me that they thought that he was flipped over such a petty thing
Yeah.
because he was. He flipped his shit because his brother
Mhm.
mentioned his car. So in a way, at first it's like, oh haha, he flipped because his mom cooked him sloppy joes. But at the same time, that's incredibly rude. Like
It is.
I love how we've jumped to, okay, let's blame the wife.
Yeah.
Let's blame the mother. Can we blame the person that killed 11 people, please?
Oh, you're going to be upset in a little bit,
Oh,
actually, then, if you feel that way.
no.
A year after the murders, the house was open to the public and all of its contents were auctioned off. A few months later, a family moved in.
You know, already this is reminding me very much of the Amityville Horror, the DeFeos.
Which is interesting because I chose not to include this in the episode because I just thought it was really ridiculous and, again, very tasteless. But the family that moved in, they basically almost immediately claimed that the house was haunted. And then there were a bunch of like ghost shows that were like going to get involved, and like it almost became something, but then it really didn't. But if you look it up, you can see like people in old chat rooms and stuff talking about it, and they're like, yeah, there's this one guy, he's like, yeah, I lived in the house and my mom saw a specter and blah blah blah, but there's no proof that this guy even went there.
Yeah. Ultimately, James would have two trials. During the first one, rather than choose a jury, he elected to be tried by a panel of 3 judges. They found him guilty on 11 counts of murder and sentenced him to life in prison on July 3rd, 1975.
During that first trial, the defense blamed the entire thing on James's mental health. They claimed that he was so paranoid that he had blamed all of his problems on his brother, which is what led him to commit the murders.
A mistrial was declared due to some confusion on how many of the judges actually had to find him guilty. 2 of them agreed that he was guilty of the crimes, while the third found him not guilty by reason of insanity.
So, to just explain that really quick, basically what the confusion was, and apparently even the judges couldn't agree on it, was if 2 out of the 3 of us say he's guilty, let's sentence him. That was kind of how it started.
2/3 majority.
Yeah, exactly. And then they were like, well, one of the judges doesn't agree. And if a full jury would have to agree that he was guilty for him to get sentenced, why can we do this?
That's very true.
And that's how the mistrial happened.
Interesting. The second trial was scheduled to take place in Hancock County, but was delayed by 2 years due to James filing various appeals. It finally began in 1982.
On July 23rd of that year, he was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder in regards to the deaths of Charity and Leonard Jr. He was declared not guilty by reason of insanity when it came to Alma and the children. He was sentenced to serve 2 life sentences for the counts and was supposed to serve them consecutively.
What?
Yep.
What?
Right?
How? Okay, yes. I killed 2 people perfectly sane and then murdered the rest of them within a very short span of time because I was nutso.
Yep.
Hello? Either you're nuts the entire time or you're not.
Especially, it's not like he like killed the 2 of them and then he like went off and did a few other things, blah blah blah, and then he came back and killed everybody else. This all happened in less than 5 minutes. So how can he like if we have anyone listening that's a law expert, thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com, please help. But I genuinely can't wrap my head around that because it does not make sense. Because either he is guilty or he's not. They were saying that, well, he had the desire to kill his mother and brother because of his history with them, and everyone else, he just went crazy and killed them too.
Oh man, I wonder if it was one of those cases where if they were like, okay, if we try and sentence him based on every single murder that happened, there may be another mistrial or something else could go wrong. So let's get him on the 2 that we know we can get him on, and kind of if the rest are a little more lenient, if you will, he's already got 2 life sentences.
And it's easier to make 2 life sentences stick than it is 11 because then he has 11 things that he can appeal.
Absolutely. During 1972 to 1976, capital punishment was temporarily suspended in the U.S. While James was sentenced in 1982, he committed his crimes during that time and was therefore not eligible for the death penalty.
And speaking of the death penalty, this is what his attorney had to say regarding it.
There are 11 dead. The most horrible thing that has happened in the United States of America in a long time. Do not make this a worse crime by adding a 12th person.
He also told the judges,
Gentlemen, death serves no purpose. Only God can give a life. Let him take it. If he has spared his life, at least we will have remained a civilized nation rather than return to barbaric times. I say to you the words, thou shalt not kill, as is applicable to the state as it is to any individual. Might have to agree to disagree with him on that one.
I am not pro death penalty. I've said that a few times. However, I do think If it has to exist, it exists for very specific people, and this is one of those people.
Absolutely. I kind of take, I don't know, not offense per se, but only God can give a life, let him take it.
And James.
And James apparently can take 11
Yeah,
lives.
exactly.
But I digress.
After his sentencing, Alma's mother spoke about her thoughts on James. She said,
I sometimes think I'd like to string him up on the cross like Christ and cut a little piece off at a time. I'd want him to bleed slowly, but if you put that in the paper, people will wonder what kind of a Catholic I am.
I think she's pretty entitled to feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. This man murdered her daughter, her son in law, and her 8 grandchildren.
Yeah.
I think she's entitled to want to cut this man up into little pieces.
And they should let her.
Especially considering, in her mind, James was responsible for a total of 13 murders. On the 3-year anniversary of their daughter's death, Alma's father ended his life. During the 1982 trial, a member of the jury collapsed. He'd had a heart attack and passed away. According to her, this was after they were forced to see photos of the crime scene that James had left behind.
People who knew James were shocked. Many of them were in denial when it came to his crimes for a very long time. One of them being his uncle, who claimed that in his eyes the brothers had always been very close and that James would do anything for his mother.
I don't know that he was paying very close attention.
Right?
Then.
He was like, they were like soldiers. They were so close. And it's like, hello?
James publicly told everybody who would listen how much he blamed his brother and his mother for everything.
Yeah, he's like, they said I was a communist. Which, like, in this day and age, that's funny.
Yeah.
But, like, back then, that was, like, one of the worst things you could say to somebody.
Yes,
It was like,
absolutely.
she's a communist.
Absolutely. One of James's friends stated,
He's not violent at all. I can't believe he did it. How could anything like that happen?
I mean, it was a pretty difficult thing to believe because even the coroner stated,
it's possible that some of them were shot once and then finally given the shot that killed them. It's unlikely that 11 people would have been shot and killed unless they were held in some way or were in a position where none of them could escape.
And again, the reality of it is, it happened so quickly that none of them even had time to process what was happening. The kids probably heard the pops of the gunshots and didn't realize what was going on. Some of them were really young kids.
Yeah.
So they were probably like, oh, what's all that? What is the commotion about? And before they knew, Uncle's coming around the corner.
Well, that's just it. They didn't have the time to react. Despite that, many members of the community wanted to see James dead for what he had done. A man named Donald Ruppert, no relation, even changed his name because he was being harassed due to people thinking he was related to James.
In 1995, James was granted a parole hearing and was quickly denied. It was rescheduled for 2015. During that hearing, the parole board stated,
"The board has determined that the inmate is not suitable for release at this time. The inmate has not completed any recommended programming and does not appear to be willing to do so. The inmate's records note negative institutional conduct. The inmate took the lives of multiple victims. There has been strong community objections to his release. The release of this inmate would not be in the best interest of justice."
I think that's very poetic justice of them, considering James thought, I'll do a few years for insanity, I'll buck my ideas up and get off scot-free. And even years and years later, the parole board is like, he has not changed. He has made no effort to change.
Yeah.
Will never change. Is dangerous. Killed 11 people.
And it's one of those things where he never accepted responsibility. He continued to blame everybody else. He was like, yeah, I killed him, but it wasn't my fault.
James was scheduled another hearing in 2025, but that time would never come. In 2022, James died of natural causes at the ripe old age of 88.
He essentially robbed 13 people of their right to pass away at an old age, but he got to do it himself, and in my personal opinion, the world became a better place after his death.
I concur with that. And that is the end of James Urppert.
What a guy.
What a guy. I always find the ones where, especially when kids are involved, are so much more difficult.
Yeah.
I hate that this man was a nuisance from day one.
Yeah.
And got to do the damage he did. Yes, he had a tough childhood, and perhaps that lack of love from his parents, shall we say, clearly affected him developmentally.
Yep.
However, not a fucking excuse. Good lord.
And the thing to like think about too is with a lot of family annihilators, you have, and I'm not saying this makes it any less terrible, but you have, they kill a spouse and children, or they kill their parents, or
Mhm.
whatever. 11 people. That is so many people.
And there's never a good excuse for this. This motherfucker just didn't like his family because of reasons that he had done to himself.
Yeah, and basically the whole thing that really started this for him, he would say this later, was when his mom had that conversation with him where she was like, listen, you're in your 30s, you're drinking 7 days a week, you're not paying rent, you're not working, why don't you get a job? And he was like, why don't I kill you?
Yeah. Logic has gone out the window. Delulu.
Yep.
I'm very glad they didn't let him out on parole, but I am a little sad that he got to pass away peacefully because he did not give that to his family members.
No, he did not.
And that is all we'll say about that matter.
Yes. James Urban.
Oh, man. Well, what do we want to talk about now? I don't have anything top of my mind.
Follow us on the social media, friends. We are on TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, all of those things. Check us out. We post little snippets of the video content. And again, if you want to see the full video, check us out on Patreon. If you subscribe for free, you get free episode reveals. So you get to find out what we're talking about before everybody else. And next week, we are talking about someone who folks have asked us to cover in the past. It is a horrific, gruesome story that I'm dreading it a little bit, but I think you're all gonna enjoy the content.
I'm here for it. I'm ready. All right, so speaking of Patreon, let's give a shout out to the wonderful VIPs we have over there. That is our top tier, so they get the shout outs at the end of the episode.
Yes, thank you so much to Lisa, Mayhem Mudkip, Kevinus Musicus, Steven Centauri, Bob, Hillary, Brian, Judy, and Atlantean Jedi. And a very quick special shout out to Judy, who emailed us saying that she really loves our videos.
Yay!
Thanks, Judy.
I'm glad you do. Thank you so much.
If you have a story that you want us to cover on the regular show or on Extra Credit, please send us an email at thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com. And if you haven't checked out Extra Credit, it is out every second Wednesday. We cover more current events. We end every episode with a strange and unusual death. It is unscripted and a little chaotic, but it's a lot of fun.
I'll give you a hint. I might be talking some more about volcanoes this week. Because Grindavik is erupting again.
I love volcano talk.
Follow me on TikTok. Don't follow me on TikTok. I don't really care. But I do repost the volcano updates when I see them. So if you're a volcano nerd like me, feel free to follow me on TikTok. I have all the good sources for the volcano updates.
And you should, because who doesn't want a volcano update?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for listening. This has been
The Grim Curriculum. I have the most useless, stupid fact for you today.
Wonderful. Let it take up space in my brain.
You know when you squeeze a blob of toothpaste onto your toothbrush?
Yes.
The technical name for that blob is a nurdle.
A nurdle?
Yep.
Oh my god. Every time I'm gonna be like, it's a nurdle.
I nurdle.
Amazing. 10 out of 10.